welcome to this week's Prepare Like a Pro. As usual, I am your host, International Master Tianqi Wang. And today, I would like to explore a sort of to be or not to be question that many of us often face in relatively critical moments of the game. As our games in a moment will demonstrate, we often run into such scenarios where we wonder, should I be remembered as a hero because I calculated an entire line that works and it brought me certain glory, or the other alternative would be, am I going to be remembered for being a total meme that calculated something so quixotic it would never even work in multiple ice ages. And so one of the very specific scenario we're going to explore today is when one side tries to break a pin by pushing the pawns in front of their king in a risky manner, which in turn provokes the other side to make a decision about giving up a knight for 2 pawns. And so for that purpose, today we're also going to sort of dive into the past and not particularly devote too much attention on the present. And so let's begin with our first model demonstration here. The game began with e4, e5, very standard procedure here, especially at the turn of the 20th century, I would say. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention that I have no idea who played the first game, so it'll be up to Ben Holmes to discover the great players that produced this miniature that I'm about to show you. Knight c6, bishop c4, and bishop c5. Of course, in modern day and age, there's knight f6 now. There's knight f6 now to attempt to get some Italian position in a more, I initially wanted to say in a more provocative way, but then I realized that also the reason why sometimes you want to go knight f6 first instead of bishop c5 is that sometimes black is not necessarily happy with dealing with, for example, this move, or maybe white plays max lane, or they pretend to play max lane and then they do this. Also possible. Lots of computer supported complication that I'm not sure how much of your health will be compromised if you try to comprehend it for too long. So anyways, let us return to our normal game here. So d3, white did not choose to go for the c3 d4 aggression here. Knight f6, very simple. Black is developing. Knight c3, d6, castles, and bishop g4. Of course, now we know that there is even an option here to play bishop e3, for example, and that sometimes we need to time when to develop these bishops based on if your opponent has castled or not. Back in the day, I suppose such subtleties have not been fully explored yet, so bishop g4 happened. Of course, white was alerted to this possibility with knight d4. And so what would be a fairly standard move for white to play here to address this uncomfortable pin? And so normally we try to move the queen off the diagonal so somehow this knight can move. And what we normally do is that we play bishop e3 first, which I suspect happened, no, but it did not happen in the game. Bishop e3, and of course after something like knight d4, we will take, and we play queen e2. The idea, of course, is that we want to play, for example, knight d1, c3, knight e3, and push the bishop back in general. And and hopefully, if black allows all of this to happen, with the bishop eventually landing on g6, we hope to have taken back some initiatives on the board. However, white began a bizarre maneuver here that I had some difficulty in comprehending, even in 2025. So I played bishop b5 here, pointing out that white is ready to give this bishop for this knight to prevent knight d4. So black castles, I think. Yes, they did that. So when this happens, we expect that white follows through the plan and plays bishop c6 as you know, as an average protagonist that got the script would do. However, white suddenly went back on their words. They played bishop e3 here. They played bishop e3 here, presumably with similar idea as before. That queen e2, knight d1, knight e3. Or that perhaps that they want to now they want to take the knight and take bishop this way and cause some, possibly lead to some positional damage to black's pawn structure. Except such concept will hinge on an unrealistic amount of cooperation from black. And so normally, if we're playing black here, we would find it very difficult to comply with everything that white has implicitly demanded from all of us. And so, what to play here with black? As 50 Shades of Jim Gray has pointed out, you play knight d4 here. I'm not sure about the prey part because you just play it, and it's a very concrete. It is a very concrete move that sends a clear message to white here. So of course, as we have discussed, after knight d4, if white is very conscious about preventing this this exact exchange, then white should take here. And after bishop d4, white will play h3, bishop h5, and now here white unfortunately has ran out of options here. Part of the issues stemming from this entire cancelled bishop b5 maneuver, because the bishop was standing much stronger on c4, and as we will see later, that being on b5 in fact leads to some colorful complication that works in black's favor because the bishop is simply out out in some fictitious parallel equivalent of Nantucket and can easily fall victim to some sort of tactic here, as we will see in a moment. So here white decided that they are out of cards to play. They played g4, and so this will be considered the first moment for black to consider if they will be big hero or if they will be a meme. And so for everyone here, what to decide for black here?
I figured out your players.
Oh.
Yeah. Salwe and Chigorin.
Oh, okay. Black I have heard of. White I have, unfortunately.
I've heard of white, but I don't know anything about him.
No. And so, if you are black here, of course there are two options. You can fall back, or what is the second thing that is possible? As you can see here, because white played this questionable move here, black noticed that the bishop is not pinning this pawn to the king anymore, so this is possible one day. And so black decided that the odds of them becoming a meme is within safe consideration, so they took knight d4. White tries to exact some smarmy maneuver here. No. That's not what happened in the game. Knight g4 is possible, by the way. Knight g4 was possible, and after knight takes d4, you can try here. Take knight d5, because if you take, I can take here, rook b1, and now how does black win? How does black get all of their investment back? So this is of course when you realize that this is when white realizes that their bishop probably should be on c4 instead of on b5, sort of. Yes, very good, Josh. Queen g5, and we just take this bishop, and we do some basic math here, and we say that 8 is more than 5. So that is one possibility here. So knight d5 here we have, in fact, another interesting idea from black, which is that we will go, is it knight h2 or no, we play knight d3, okay. Play knight d3, here, knight f1, and here white is actually not on time to not on time to claim this knight because, for example, if you play rook f1 now, we just play c6, and again, black, if you're playing black here, you should give white a very stern stare and wonder why they haven't stopped the clock yet. And if white tries again, white tries to be a little bit smarmy and does bishop a4, then we can, for example, try knight d2 here, rook d1 and c6. Knight. Yeah, and c6, and of course now we have b5, and now this bishop is trapped. And so here, however, black did not go for this. Black went for the simpler bishop takes c3, b takes, and only now they went all in with knight takes and bishop g4. Here, in fact, here white is in a lot of trouble because they're up a knight, but their pieces are completely unequipped to, completely out of position to address this pin, so to speak. If the bishop is here, perhaps white would have been able to buy themselves some more time. Unfortunately, now white quickly slide farther down, farther into their downfall. They play d4. Of course, d4 is so that white finally brings the out of position bishop back to e2. Of course, black completely ignores this, plays f5, bishop e2, takes, knight d2, but I find it difficult to believe that white survives after bishop h3 even here, because white has to go here, so this is not a, this doesn't end the game immediately. After bishop f1, queen f5, queen f1, queen h4, we play rook f6, we play rook, other rook to f8. I find it difficult to believe that white can hold out much longer, as f2 will meet their end pretty soon. And so white went knight d2 in this game. And now, if you're black here, what can you do to quickly convince white to stop the clock here and earn yourself a much deserved between round rest? And so, we firstly should try to eliminate some defenders with bishop e2. This is also important in terms of pacing, that white has no chance to improvise because the entire sequence is forcing. So white has to take. But now, because we traded the bishops and cleared a runway, what can we play here with black? So, of course, we realize that there are no pawns in front of the white king, so we play queen g5. And after king h1, white gave up after the simple move rook f4 here. The only move, I guess, is that we have to go here, but after rook h4, we take this knight at the end of the line, and more or less white has run out of cards to keep playing. So that is our first example when white attempted to play h3 g4 to break a pin, but unfortunately black noticed some subtleties that convinced him that the best way to move forward was in fact to go all in on taking g4 with their knight. And so that will be our first example where giving up the knight for 2 pawns in such manner resulted in black being immortalized. And in fact, as Ben pointed out, black at the height of their career in fact was contending even for the title of world champion. And thus we move on to our next example. Let's see. I hope the book is providing me the right information, because it claims that this game white was Geza Maroczy and black was David Janowski. And so the game of course started with e4 again, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop a4, knight f6. And now, of course, today many of us play castles, and perhaps some complications arise after here. Knight e4, rook e1, no, not rook e1, excuse me, it's actually d4, d5, then d takes, bishop e6. I think the line goes something like this now. And of course now it becomes a opposite side race. In other words, can black bulldoze white on the queen side before white bulldozes black back on the king side with their pawn majority. However, presumably appreciating the offensive prowess of Janowski, white opted to go for a relatively more chill continuation, which is to go d3 immediately. Black plays bishop c5. Of course, you can play b5 here also, I suspect, and it will more or less transpose to some other well-known ways to continue in this opening. So d3, black plays bishop c5, arguing that white did not castle, which meant that the pawn on e5 is not free yet. Castles, d6, bishop e3, b5, bishop b3, and now again we fall into the classical trope of bishop g4, this pin against knight and queen. Here, of course, knight d4 again could be a threat, but here we notice also a small difference here, that white's knight is on b1. If the knight is not on b1, it is not mandatory for it to go to c3. It can certainly also go to d2 and facilitate a much faster pin breaking process, so to speak, as the knight on d2 will support the other knight on f3, so the queen can just move by themselves without having to zigzag around to keep an eye on the knight. So let's see how white continued here. They played c3, which is of course another luxury that was afforded to them because white did not play knight c3 so early during the game. Queen e7. Black again is anticipating that white will take on c5, which is certainly an option, but There could be some reservations about this exchange because they would expose this pawn to something like rook d8, for example. Knight d2, rook d8, bishop d5. Relatively interesting idea to completely discourage this knight from hopping over to d4 and perhaps enabling white to play d4 in the future, taking advantage of black's gap in time where they have not found the right moment to castle. Knight b8. Of course, we just continue, and now, in fact, white attempting to petrify the center with c4 will simply be answered with c6. d4 takes, bishop b6. Black is not concerned because white still has to address this tension here. So white fell back, and black castled, simply avoiding some possible complications after, for example, bishop f7. And castles. So white plays rook to e1, c5. Of course, when you should play on the side where you have more pawns, which should be, distinguished from when you do minority attacks. This is sort of a different idea here. So of course, white plays d5, and here black plays bishop a5. Now they're threatening many things such as knight e4 and c4, and so white plays bishop c2 to defend, because also now c4 would not come with tempo, so to speak. Knight d7, h3, bishop h5, bishop f4. White realizes that perhaps this bishop should find itself in some more productive places than to intercept knight e5, for example. However, I am not entirely positive that bishop f4 was not entirely positive that bishop f4 was able to solve white's positional issues here, because as the game will demonstrate, white plays rook e3, black kicks the rook back, rook e1. So here, sort of already, white is happy to repeat the position with bishop a5, rook e3, but of course, there's no need to repeat anymore because the bishop on e3 has left the diagonal on f4 now. So of course we move in with bishop knight e5, bishop takes, d takes, and now again we have g4 on the board. Now again, we come to this critical moment where we want to ask ourselves, are we going to be remembered for calculating a variation to the end where everything is totally working, or we are going to be a laughingstock for the ages because white, in fact, has sufficient resources to defend their position on the king side? And so we have, and so we should note some difference here, that unlike the first example, white has the knight on d2 already. So in fact, if you take here bishop g4, white can already move their queen. That being said, we should also note that normally in such positions we would have a hard time putting all of our pieces into the game, because normally we would have a pawn and a pawn on c7, d6, so this rook would have a hard time joining the other pieces, and normally also this pawn is will have some difficulty moving to f5 because of a possible pin here. However, in this position, both options are possible. You are certainly able to play bishop g6, threatening to play h5. A possible line even can go like this, for example, that knight h4. We have an interesting idea to play knight d5 takes, and now not h takes, but we play f takes. And after ed and rook f2, white's position may quickly collapse, because we have opposite color bishops, where this bishop is more or less a non-factor, because it does not stop the bishop on b6. For example, if we play king h1 here, then queen h4 will more or less quickly end the game here. We can just snake our way in, or just take this pawn. However, black, just like the example before us, black chose to play knight g4. Takes, bishop g4, and now king g2. If you're black here, you may or may not have realized that your bishop on g4 is fighting on their own. And in that case, what can you do to help out your bishop on g4? And so, I think, what did black play here? Yep, black played rook d6 with the idea that the rook can come to g6 or even f6. And eventually, when everything is ready, f5 will be played, and white's f3 knight and the f2 pawn will they will not be able to hold up for much longer afterwards. So, to rook d6, rook g1 happened, rook f6, queen e1, with the idea to unpin and maybe play knight h2. However, black plays rook f4 with the idea to take and play f5 by force. So rook f4 was in fact what white had not accounted for, and now they don't have many good moves here, and eventually white was unable to find a good way to salvage their position, so they played king f1, giving up the extra knight, And after rook g2, queen h4, king g1, black very quick, convincingly won the game after rook h3. And so, in this case, we again we see that black succeeded in giving up the knight for 2 pawns because all of their pieces were in position, and again white was unable to put to use the pieces that were simply left behind on the queen side. However, today we intend to look at both sides, and so we come to our last example for today, where white in fact came up with a much stronger defensive measure against the pin, and they eventually triumphed. e4, e5. Oh, and of course, before I continue any further, with white plays Aron Nimzovitsch, and I think black was Frank Marshall. Knight f3, knight c6, c3, knight f6, bishop b5, bishop b4. Okay, so again, nothing completely out of the ordinary, just 2 people trying to play normal chess that more or less conforms to all known chess principles to us. Castles, and here white immediately causes positional asymmetry with bishop takes knight. I suspect if black really wanted to, they could actually try to copycat completely here with, for example, this. And here, I think this is what I saw some of my friends were doing, that after queen e5, after queen e5 they were unable to take on e4 because this pawn is hanging, so they have to play d6, and now after queen c3, again this pawn is hanging, and maybe white is a little bit better at the end. So I guess that means that in fact copying is not possible after a certain amount of time passes. And of course, black plays dc because black notices an opportunity to play bishop g4. Now white, of course, can choose to play here, but as we can see, black can simply kill the game with something like this. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone can claim for themselves to be better here. And so to avoid the game prematurely ending in peace, white chose to reinforce his pawn with d3. And now this move does not really have that much value, because white has c4, rook b1 with a very robust control of center here. That being said, there is of course some inherent value here, in the sense that removing this knight prevents this knight from being able to transfer itself to the king side, and eventually supporting white in unpinning from this from bishop g4. So, however, I think after d3, black played bishop g4 immediately. So white answered h3, bishop h5, and here white came up with their improved version of attempting to unpin with g4. So, in this case, what do you believe was the new idea that white brought to the table here? And of course, Nimzovich here noticed that they can try and shift their king and rook 1 square to the right, and then they can play g4 with a Dakwit support. Normal at super. Who is the highest rated player I played? Online, of course, I played our immortalized by chess.com Hikaru, and offline maybe Ilya Nizhnik when he was 2700. Here white did not play g4. They played, in fact, I think they played king h1 here, and after queen d6, well, no, actually queen d6. Here black played queen d6 in what I suspect to be an overly ambitious idea. Perhaps it was better again to simply take and play queen e7 with the idea to play knight d7, knight f8, knight e6 eventually, and just play positionally. However, as we know, black came up with one of the most immortalized gambit in e4 e5, and so unfortunately it is not likely that they're going to settle for long positional chess. So queen d6, and now white plays g4. Takes, bishop takes, and now the difference is that the king is on h1, which means we are able to simply seek eviction of the bishop on g4 with rook g1. So it is possible to play h5, but I suspect that white will simply just give this rook and play knight h2. And it is not clear how black defends this pawn, because black will not play f5 because we take and we play knight e4, we play queen g4, we play bishop e3, and white simply does not have any flat-out weaknesses, and black's position is also progressively losing elasticity to continue fighting. So here black opted to play queen g6 with the idea to play queen h5, but of course, as if you're the author of my system, you would know such worm doodling tricks. So you play rook g4, queen g4, knight h2, and now black realizes that the attack more or less is over, because black's pieces are as unprepared to attack the white king as white's pieces are, unprepared on the queen side to defend their king. So here black settled for queen d1, knight d1, and in this still relatively competitive position, black commits a massive positional error here. They played f5, but of course, as I have previously discussed, this is an extremely compromising move for black, because black will simply be strategically lost after white plays what move. We don't have Tuesday Masters with Danish anymore?
He is out tonight, so yeah. Talia will be subbing for him. He might be out for a few weeks, actually.
I see. And so, if you're white here, how do you find your way to certain glory because black allowed you to do so? Uh, and so the thank you. I did not know that we were able to create such positive contributions for Chess Lover on Twitch. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Part of Black's positional downfall here is that they're left with this bishop, which means that in the contest for light squares, Black will always not have the upper hand. And so f5 here is unfortunately helping White to monopolize the light squares and establish anchoring squares for the knights, such that Black's extra pawns will not matter because they will be anchored down, and White can simply divide and conquer on the pawns. Also, especially important to consider that Black has no way to hunt down this rook on a1. And as we know, in such material imbalance struggles, if you cannot hunt down this remaining rook from the minor piece side, you're in for a lot of trouble. So White plays takes, rook f5, bishop e3. Of course, we protect the pawn. Rook f8, knight f1, check, rook h4. I suspect that Black actually realized the problem here and they're attempting to play e4, but of course we intercept with knight g3, h5, which again is extremely imprecise from Black because they are still unrealistically expecting for an attack to work out, except that will not happen because we play f3. And suddenly what happens? What happens is we realize that the rook on h4 is suddenly becoming the bad guy at the end of a crime at the end of a crime drama, soon to be apprehended. And so Black plays bishop e7 because they have to. Bishop g5 was a real threat to be respected. And after knight e4, I don't have the rest of the games, but the game cuts here and saying that eventually White was able to corner this rook on h4, and White went on to win the game. And I suspect what happened was that White played knight c3, knight e2, which is to control his f4 square, and then they went bishop f2. And so Black most likely gave up at the end because the two pawns cannot move and they have to fight down a knight. I hope everyone was able to take something away from these examples from the past. There are things to consider when you make these decisions of are people going to remember us for being a hero, for correctly calculating everything, or are people going to remember us as a meme because we calculated a completely unrealistic line? Things to look for would be, some things of course we should look for would be how ready are your pieces and how ready are your opponent's pieces. And of course we should always realize that when we take such risks, the defending side the defending side can always try to sabotage you by giving the piece back. Yes, yes, I agree, Josh. I feel that chess has not done our national icon enough service here. But that being said, once again, I hope everyone has enjoyed my my model games today, and I wish everyone a good rest of evening, and stick around for our next show, which is Tuesday Masters with Women's Grandmaster Talia Cervantes Landero.